My mother was not in a death cult. My father was not in a death cult. You know, I was not raised in a death cult.
Mm-hmm.
There are certainly radical elements within Islam. You know, my aunt, she's a great cook, not a death cult organizer, right? Like,
Mm.
you know what I mean? So,
And a lot of your non-death cult relatives were killed by death cult people.
right. And that's the other part of it, right?
Mm.
Like, if you, those things do exist, but it's kind of ridiculous to lay out blanket statements.
Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 Khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession.
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
Welcome to this episode of Christ and Caliphate. Today we are going to go through this box that contains about 2 papers and a half full of YouTube comments from the comment thread that you can find in Cultish's latest couple of episodes on the origin and history of Islam. We talk a bit about Muhammad. James is the guest star in those episodes. And today we're just going to take a look at what's in this box and read some of these comments, talk about them a little bit.
All right, opening Pandora's box now.
This guy is dismissing the research people are conducting to prove that Islam was not started in Mecca. He's going with the Islamic narrative that doesn't really align with the history. Shame on you. There is no archaeological or historical evidence for Mecca in the 7th century. Please don't dismiss the research people are doing to question how Islam was started. I think Dr. J. Smith Al-Fadi, who was born and raised in Mecca, and other folks looking at how Islam started and are doing a good job questioning the Islamic narrative based on claims in the Qur'an as well as the writers of the Hadith. Sorry about the any like gaps there, the punctuation, because with every comment section, the punctuation and the capitals and everything are all off.
Okay, so let's respond to this, right? So first of all, I'm not dismissing any research here. I don't know if you guys know this. I actually know Al-Fadi.
Oh, funny.
I met him at the airport in Orlando, and we text each other. We're friends.
Okay.
We're not like good friends, but I like him. I think.
Who is he in relation to Jay Smith?
He's a Saudi Christian YouTuber. He's not just a YouTuber. He's more than a YouTuber. He's a man. He's a father. He's a believer. Jay Smith and Al-Fadi have both done a lot of work on sort of polemics in dealing with Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And right now they're very much on the idea train that Muhammad never existed. And so what you see in this comment is 2 different theories sort of next to each other, right? So there's a guy called Dan Gibson that's done some research that does not believe that Mecca existed at the time of Muhammad. But he does believe Muhammad existed. Dan Gibson believes that Muhammad was actually operating in Petra in Jordan, and the beginnings of Islam started north, and then the location of Mecca was changed later. But he does believe Muhammad existed. And then what people like Jay Smith and Al-Fadi and lots of sort of secular academics are doing is employing something called the historical critical method on the Islamic sources. And basically what this does is an approach to history that says, unless you can show me archaeological evidence that Muhammad existed, like, a seal with his name on it or a rock inscription, then he didn't exist. I personally don't actually think the historical critical method is a good methodology. I don't think it actually is that useful a way of showing us how the world works. All it can show us is what we can actually find from archaeology. And
yeah, because Christianity would come short in some areas in that method, a lot of areas in that method as well.
yes, and especially when this started getting presented to Christians, everyone was caught flat-footed, because the conversation in Europe was not, did Jesus exist or not? Did these things really happen? It was a debate over what these things mean. So occasionally you'd have this debate in the Catholic Church of whether a relic was authentic or not. It was never a question of whether Jesus is authentic. So nobody is trying to prove it because they don't feel like they need to prove it. And so when these German scholars in the 1800s come against the Christian worldview, people are caught flat-footed because they don't know how to respond to stuff that they haven't been trying to really keep track of for 1700 years. It's like getting audited by the IRS when you're not expecting to. Right? It doesn't mean you're a criminal, but you might be caught flat-footed there. And so in the Islamic world, nobody is questioning whether Muhammad existed or not. And only now people are starting to. And people are having a hard time providing the evidence. That doesn't mean that evidence doesn't exist somewhere. It just means it hasn't been sort of collated and presented yet. So if you guys are interested in more of my view on this, you can check out the video we put out last week called Why I Think Muhammad Actually Existed.
It's disingenuous to breeze over the fact that Aisha was 6 years old when Muhammad married her and 9 years old when consummated.
So this is the thing when talking about like anything from history, and this was kind of a common theme. In the first episode, I mentioned Aisha, and I did not mention that she was 9 years old when Muhammad...
6, according to this person.
6 when the marriage was arranged, and then 9 when they actually, consummated the marriage, right? And so the person commenting is not making something up here. According to Sahih al-Bukhari, according to Sahih Muslim and a lot of Islamic sources, Aisha was in fact 9 years old when Muhammad consummated his marriage with her. The reason I'm not always going to get into that on the first pass is because that's not the only perspective within the Islamic world, right? So, there's lots of Shia, for example, that believe she was older. There's some Sunnis and other sources that believe she was 18 when they got married. And so the thing is, like, why I don't think it's that helpful a thing to focus on, because there are lots of ways Muslims have learned to rationalize this over the years, right? So some say, no, the hadith is wrong. It's, she's 18. Other people say, well, she was an unusually mature girl. Well, it's like Edward and Bella's daughter from Twilight who grew up fast and married Jacob, right? It's
so, oh my God. Muhammad's a vampire.
So there's lots of ways people can rationalize that away.
They're definitely compelled to rationalize it.
Right, people are compelled to rationalize it away. I'm not hiding from that fact. It's just I don't think it's the most useful thing to get into sort of like.
Why isn't it useful?
I didn't say it's never useful. I'm saying it's not the most useful things to argue about, right? So if I was going to Yemen, a place, or Afghanistan where child marriage is like regularly practiced, then I think that would be a bigger part of the conversation. With the majority of Muslims in the world, they're not looking to this as an example. They're trying to ignore that it's there, and they are not practicing child marriage, right? Most Muslim families are overprotective of their daughter. They're not marrying them off when they're 9 years old. So I think a bad habit Christians have when engaging Muslims is we want to constantly jump on the problems that Muslims don't know that they have. So they want to look at all the worst parts of Muhammad's life and say, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. And you don't want to hide from those things, but it is more complicated than that, especially with how the Muslim community actually processes Muhammad's life. So I think it's really important to be able to interact with the problems that Muslims themselves are interacting with, not just the ones we think they should be interacting with. So, if I was going to draw a criticism of Muhammad's marital life, for example, I would personally start with his marriage to Zainab who was the ex-wife of his adopted son. Because that I think is a lot more problematic for the Islamic sources, because Muhammad adopts a son. Muhammad's son is married. Muhammad visits his son, and for whatever reason, his son decides to divorce his wife, and Muhammad wants to marry this woman. And Surah Al-Azhab, the 33rd surah of the Qur'an, comes down, explicitly abolishing adoption and permitting this marriage between Muhammad and Zainab. I think that's more of a, that's more that it's more substantial, because it actually is kind of a clue to how Muhammad is using his influence in ways that aren't always, the most savory. So that's kind of how I think about that.
Here we go. Ready? I understand he knows his Muslim friends will be listening. He wants them all to still engage him. He's representing what they think of themselves. It's 6 parts. I hope he discusses taqiyya and why not more modern Muslims speak out against sanctioned rape and murder of infidels. Regardless, the gospel doesn't leave room for benefit of the doubt.
Okay, so firstly, I appreciate...
Solid comment.
And I appreciate that person extending me the benefit of the doubt and being willing to listen to, all 6 episodes of what we have to say. On the last 2 points, I actually think there's plenty of moderate Muslims who do speak out against those things. For example, right, your dad would be someone who would have spoken out against those things,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
He would be speaking out against Osama bin Laden. He'd be speaking out against the Taliban. He was trying to warn people about these things when no one was listening.
Yes.
Right? He was not a believer. He died Muslim.
Right.
But he was one of these voices.
Right.
The question is, how would somebody in the YouTube comment section even find those moderate Muslim voices, right? That's my question to you. Do you have Muslim friends? Have you been to like local mosques? Are you looking at Muslim news sources like Al Arabian News, or even Al Jazeera at times as well?
Yeah, I mean, we live in the age of polarization. So, whose moderate voices stand out to you? How many moderate voices do you hear, and how big of a platform do they have? I mean, there's like a deafening silence because all the platforms are taken up by like the carnival barkers of the right and the left, or the conservative and the progressive. So I think it's hard to find the opinion of a moderate Muslim they exist, but you have to go looking for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the fact is, most of them don't get as many. There's people who are sort of more polarizing out there, and and less apologetic, and those people are much more entertaining to watch most of the time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And to be honest, a lot of the moderate voices are just kind of boring.
Right.
And it's
right.
They're not going to get as many views, right?
Sure.
And that's kind of how it works.
Clickbait world.
So I would respond to that by saying, okay, examine these things. Is it really true that more moderate Muslims are not speaking out? Or is it just a case where the feedback loop you're in is preventing those voices from actually, getting to you? And then, I want to make a video about this idea of like taqiyya at some point,
right?
In the future.
Right.
And
did you cover it in the series?
No.
Okay.
Because I think really taqiyya, as far as a systemized idea, is actually more of a, Western projection upon Islam to some extent. I'm not saying that Muslims never lie. I'm not saying there's not people who are up to something. But I think what people do is they find something that happens to exist in the Muslim source and just kind of like project that onto a doctrine that people are, raised with. Most Muslims are not raised in this idea that they are allowed to sort of hide what they do in order to advance the cause of Islam.
Yeah.
Right? The people who are the most extreme Muslims are the people that want to they can't contain themselves. They can't stop speaking.
Right.
And generally, if people are presenting themselves as moderate, it's not because they're trying to trick you into thinking they're, moderate. Now, you get politicians who may be more like that, who may be a little bit more underhanded. But, we just use the word politician, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a thing. And there are people everywhere who find rationalizations in order to lie and be deceptive in order to advance their agenda,
Right.
including among Muslims. And I'm sure there are Muslims who would use these ideas as justification for that.
Right.
But it's not a widespread thing. Now, people are going to say here, well, you're just saying that because all of your Muslim friends are practicing taqiyya on you to think that they're not dangerous.
Yeah, because they're that organized.
Yeah, right. It's like anybody who thinks that there's some like grand plan by Muslims in general to take over America has clearly never been to like a barbecue planned by Muslims.
Yeah.
Nope. Right.
It's not a thing. And if you think it's a thing, I'd advise you to kind of like just spend more time with people, getting to know people, and you'll see in time.
Right.
So what about the first part about your friends?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually very much trying to speak in a way where I'm speaking in one language everywhere I am. So I want to be able to speak to Christians in a way that if my Muslim friends overhear me, people know they're not like, oh wow, he's saying
Different,
that.
yeah.
He's different. And I don't want to speak to Muslims in a way that Christians would be like, whoa, what's he saying here? I want to speak in a consistent language in every setting across the board, because I have nothing to hide.
I mean, I think one thing that we do and we strive for at the Al-Maida Initiative is to make Islam more accessible to Christians and Christianity more accessible to Islam, to Muslims. So, that one language thing is important, right? And being just clear in what you're communicating, because otherwise we would be guilty of the same thing, right?
Right,
the same
right.
accusation, You
Right.
say one thing to Muslims and you say another thing to Christians, and really that's like the worst of stereotypes, right? Like it's the same kind of thinking that people apply to Jews, or like the suspicion with which Muslims look at Christians and Christians look at Muslims. It's just, they're ridiculous stereotypes. It's I would say I wouldn't say it's not a non-issue, but it's an overblown issue.
Yep.
May I?
Yes.
This one's.
Can I read my next one in the voice of
That's Tomasz. Is that how you say that?
Ah.
Please, with full respect to this man, but he doesn't speak Arabic, and Qur'an must be read in Arabic because the translation is super difficult. Get an actual Muslim, Lebanese preferably, because we are open-minded. Me as a Catholic, we coexist. But what he is explaining is not accurate, sorry, and the Hadith needs scholars. There is a big difference between Smith and Muhammad. There is no relation at all, and in Islam there is Sunni and Shia. Each one has his perspective. Again, I am Christian. I advise you get a Lebanese Muslim young generation guy. I feel like we could find a Lebanese young generation. Could definitely do that.
Yeah, we can do that. So I think the problem with that attitude there is she's essentially falling for the Islamic perspective on Islam at that point, is that you are an unqualified individual who is actually incapable of understanding things that are this complex unless you've gone through, massive amounts of input and training. And it's not surprising because that is the exact same attitude perpetuated by Roman Catholicism as well. Roman Catholicism and Islam in many ways are mirror images of each other. And one of those mirror images is you, the individual worshipper, are unqualified. You're not capable of understanding by this yourself. You need the magisterium or you need the ulama, right? And unless you have that, you can't comprehend this properly. Therefore,
and
you
shouldn't be speaking
on it, right? Therefore, you, the average Muslim or Catholic, your job is to show up, do the rituals, and follow your leaders. So for us, we have gone through the Hadith extensively. We have looked at the context, we examine the context, and we have somebody on our team who speaks Quranic Arabic fluently, who can understand the Hadith fluently, and we're not making anything up, right? And so I think people who'd say that, show us an example. Show us an example of something we've said which is wrong or cited improperly, and we'll have a conversation about this. But I think this person is just falling for the branding and the sort of marketing of the sort of Catholic idea and the sort of Islamic idea.
Not to say all Catholics and all Muslims.
Correct, right. From the
People that try, for sure.
Yeah.
Historically, yes.
From the, sort of
Foundationally.
the historic
yes.
foundational streams, right. I know there's exceptions among you from both camps, and I appreciate you guys. But the biblical stance is that every individual image bearer of God is responsible and capable of understanding God themselves and should strive to do that. So love the Lebanese, but I think you're wrong.
Okay, Ivars.
Okay, ready? Let's see what we got here. Okay. I want to read one of these. Let me find a bad one and then read it in the voice of Emperor Palpatine. Mr. Raymond. Mr. Raymond is giving the part of the story that Muslims want Christians to hear. He is not aware, or he is probably skipping the many Qur'an and Hadith verses where non-Muslims are clearly cursed and called to be exterminated.
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you for calling me Mr. Raymond. I appreciate the respect afforded to me there. There's plenty of things in what I'm presenting about the history of Islam that the average Muslim would not know and would not be, excited about. I'm not presenting everything the way a Muslim would present it, but I am presenting everything from Islamic sources. And he said things are leading out of the story, right? And this is precisely it. The Quran and the Hadith do not tell a story. We are, sourcing a lot of this from the Hadith, but we're telling the story of how things developed. I'm not trying to hide from any, difficult verses. Now, with what he said at the end, there are verses in the Hadith which promote expansionism. There are times in Muhammad's life where he slaughtered people and had people slaughtered, like the Banu Qurayza, a Jewish tribe in Medina, right? That's a real thing that happened. In general, the Islamic sources do not tell Muslims to go out and exterminate everybody. They tell them to go and wage war, to conquer people, and those conquered people can either convert to Islam, they can keep their religion and pay a tax, or they can die. Right. That's not exactly the same thing as being told to exterminate everybody.
Yeah, and I think the confusion is taking what the sources say and equating it to some of the things that happen in the world today, right? Because, if you were to look at ISIS, right? There's not a lot of opportunities to convert or pay a tax. It's, it's convert or die, and even to other Muslims, it's, you're either with us or against us, and if you're against us, then you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it just goes beyond that. And actually, I want to commend you for sourcing Quran and Hadithic sources.
Yeah.
To answer this question, right?
So, was Islam a militaristic, expansionist religion early on? Without a doubt. And it is that way because of the Islamic sources.
Sure.
Was it a religion that went around exterminating everybody?
Mm-hmm.
No, it was not.
Yes.
Did a lot of people die? Yeah. Were they just systematically trying to exterminate everyone who wasn't Muslim? No.
Right.
Not happening.
Right. Prophet Muhammad was prophesied to come for all Gentiles in Isaiah 42. It says he would bring the...
I just got a headache.
It says he would bring the idol worshippers out of darkness, which he did, and bring them the magnified law in verse 21. In verse 11, it talks about the villages of Kedar who will rejoice, and the people of Selah. Kedar is the son of Ishmael in Genesis 25:13. These are the idol-worshipping Ishmaelites who would be taken out of darkness and start to praise the God of Abraham through God's prophet Muhammad. Unfortunately, majority of Christians don't read in context, which is why you are all still disbelievers. I am just so happy I've studied the context and am a Muslim.
Okay, we're not reading the context.
Wow.
Because presumably,
oh my gosh,
I don't mean to stretch things.
Is this what an aneurysm feels like?
Yes. Presumably, the context for Isaiah 42 is Isaiah 41.
Right.
So the context of Isaiah 41 says the servant is in verse 8, but you Israel, my servant Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend. I took you from the ends of the earth and called the farthest corners, saying, you are my servant, I have chosen you and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you, do not be dismayed, I am your God. So, if you read Isaiah in context, which this comment is not doing, this is not an Arab prophet coming to lead the Arabs to, replace Israel as God's chosen people. This is a Jewish prophet coming to extend God's salvation to the ends of the earth, including the Arab world.
Yeah.
So the book of Isaiah has this amazing chapters of hope for the Arab world. God does love the Arabs. God doesn't love Jews and hate Arabs. God loves Jews and Arabs. And that's what Isaiah talks about. And there's hope. But to say that this is talking about Muhammad and accuse us of taking things out of context.
I don't think that other majority Muslims would even agree with this.
No.
Because they would say that Isaiah.
I've met a couple Dawa bros who do some similar twisting. Right. So.
Because Isaiah could be corrupted. I think I've heard that often.
Sure. Okay. And again, even if you want to make the argument, this is about Muhammad, the rest of Isaiah is corrupted. You still can't make the accusation that we're reading it out of context.
Right. Yeah.
Like you're saying the context has been corrupted.
Yeah.
And the original context would point to Muhammad, right?
Yeah.
So it's like.
I think the difference between here is context and subtext, right?
Yeah.
Like what he's doing is transplanting context with his own subtext.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like the lens through which he's looking at everything is through the lens of the truth coming from the Qur'an and the Hadith, right? So it's not looking at it contextually, right? Like you're picking and choosing what you want your emphasis to be on. Like you're trying to prove the Qur'an. You're not trying to disprove it, or you're not looking at it dispassionately, or you're not looking at it objectively, right? You're not looking at it, certainly not looking at it historically, right?
Talking about Kedar and Ishmael and bringing the Ishmaelites out of darkness.
Yeah, right. Again, all true. Through Jesus, which the rest of Isaiah clearly points to.
Oh my gosh, it starts in chapter 40 and it ends in chapter 66. And it's pretty much just Jesus talking through Isaiah.
Yeah. So again, in fact, if somebody
unless it's all corrupted.
So listen, right? I think there's some Muslims that are watching that are going to think, okay, yeah, you're reading this out of context and you're saying this, and maybe some Christians have never read the context. I would just say anybody read from Isaiah 40 to the end of the book of Isaiah and see what it's talking about.
Right.
Read the whole thing.
40 to 60.
66.
66.
And I would also add that it's one of the most beautiful parts of the Bible.
Yeah.
Anywhere, because it's like not just restoration for like the
humanity,
Jews or Israel or anything. It's God's invitation to humanity to be restored.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like so, and we see that as it's revealed in Jesus. Oh, these are great. I love these. This was Soft on Islam. And before you come back and say it's many parts, meaning the series is many parts, you need to go much harder on such a satanic death cult. Wow, how to make friends and influence people.
So again, here is the thing, right? We got this a lot from this episode. People want us to just kind of like, unleash on Islam.
Does Jay Smith do that?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them do.
Yeah.
They just go on TikTok, It's just like, I have my thoughts on this, but you go ahead.
Because you were compared primarily to Jay Smith, like a ton of times.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the.
That's who people want.
That's what people want.
People want me to be Jay Smith or David Wood.
Yeah.
So the problem with this is that this is essentially building a straw man. So what you're doing is taking all the worst parts of the Islamic source materials and trying to basically put the Muslim in front of you on trial for those things. I'm not interested in doing that. I am interested in understanding the point of view that the Muslim in front of me has in a way that they would recognize themselves, right? And I still think there are problems and errors in those ways of thinking, but it's not that it's not all the things that the comment section want us to deal with, right? Those do exist in some parts of the world, right? In Taliban's Afghanistan,
Right.
these things are a problem. In
Right.
parts of Yemen, these things are a problem. In
Yeah.
parts of Somalia, these things are problems, right? But these don't really represent the people most people are actually going to be interacting with. So it's really, really important that you see the person in front of you as an individual, that you accurately represent what they themselves believe and understand it, and then you're in a much better position to meaningfully critique something at that point. And I think that's simply a more effective way of communicating.
Can I just add two things? First of all, this speaks to what you see on TikTok and lots of other places in social media or on the mainstream media even. It's this idea that you have a counterpoint argument with someone going hard, right, against Islam, and then a Muslim going hard against Christianity. So many of those on TikTok. It's a debate thing, but it really just turns into what I call the rap battle syndrome, right? Because you ever see 8 Mile, right? In the movie 8 Mile, Eminem is up there and he's like, rapping against this other guy, and the other guy comes back and starts busting on him, and they just keep going back and forth, and you're waiting for somebody to just like win and drop the mic, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
But the latest song quote Eminem put out called "Lose It," and he makes a reference to that movie, and he's like, "Look, this V-Rabbit, you signed me up to battle. I'm a grown man."
right.
Oh,
And
I think I listened.
Lose Yourself has like one of the sickest like beats I've ever heard. But that being aside, that's what people. It seems like this is what people want.
They want a
right?
rap
They
battle.
want somebody to come on, and it's also kind of speaks to this greater thing in American culture where or Western culture where you get to like just tell me what I need to know in 3 sentences. And I get a lot of this with people contacting me, like, tell me how to defeat Islam in like 3 sentences, Here, give me a book that will defeat Islam, this, that, and that. And the thing that I try to guide them to is, no, it's relational, right? Like, listen, my mother was not in a death cult. My father was not in a death cult. I was not raised in a death cult.
Mm-hmm.
There are certainly radical elements within Islam. My aunt, she's a great cook, not a death cult organizer, right? Like, you know what I mean? So
and a lot of your non-death cult relatives were killed by death cult people.
right, and that's the other part of it, right? Like those things do exist, but it's kind of ridiculous to lay out blanket statements. And honestly, if we want to, before like post Crusades and before like 9/11. Really what you saw was a lot of like sectarian battles within Islam, right? Like, the Iran-Iraq conflict, the hatred of Shias and Sunnis kind of turning into violence, and then on top of that, like on a more micro level, targeting certain ethnicities, right? So within Afghanistan, it's the Hazaras. It's how do we go after people we don't like? So listen, if Islam has a problem, the main problem is that it's easy to create these divisions, right? It's easy to sit there and point the finger at another group and say you're not Muslim or you're not Muslim enough, and then turn to whatever means you want to turn to marginalize or even eliminate that group. So, I just wanted to put it out there. Listen, we don't do rap battles, right? Like we don't, that's not something we do. And I don't think it's very effective either.
We only do Palpatine.
Oh, ready? Here we go. I promised I would do this. This comment,
This comment.
one word. Pathetic. How would you respond to that?
Here's how I'll respond to it. Thank you for providing an authentic YouTube comments experience.
Yeah, there's certainly some hate in the YouTube comment section of anything, right? Yeah.
Well, guys, this has been fun. If you guys like it, let us know. We have more comments we can respond to. We're having fun. We hope you had fun too. Until next time.